We're live. I had a few problems last week with getting the live up. So welcome to everyone who's here to listen to the second tutorial on hip dysplasia. They're my two little doggies. That's Sunshine, that's the one who's got hip dysplasia, and Sushi was getting a little bit jealous. So I thought I'd better pop a picture in with her. I've been doing lots of pictures and videos and stuff with Sunshine, and Sushi's been feeling a little bit left out. Thanks so much for everyone who watched the first one. We had loads and loads of comments. I think Arlene Stewart with her dog Caesar, she took some measurements. Denise Retty, thanks for everyone. Eddie Veerheim had loads of comments and people sharing the measurements and that they took with their pets' hind legs. And so if you didn't get to watch the first week, please, you can scroll down on my Facebook page now, and you can just watch the recording after we finish with the live today. I love to hear from you guys, so please, I want to see loads and loads of comments below. If you have any questions, post pictures of your dogs. Tell me about your dogs. Tell me about when they were diagnosed, how old they are, what they're struggling with. All your questions that you're going to ask me now in the next tutorials, I'll be able to answer. So I really hope that I'll be able to help you and guide you so that your pets can have better mobility. And really, our goal is to increase their lifespan. So just because they've been diagnosed with hip dysplasia doesn't mean that they can't live a happy, mobile life. We've just got a little bit of work to do. And I'm very excited that you are joining me on this journey. So let's go on to the next slide. I just want to remind you that it's every Wednesday, 12:30, and the last one will finish on the 11th of April. So we're on week 2 and we've got 10 more weeks after this. So just a quick recap of the first tutorial. We talked about the causes of hip dysplasia. We talked about that there was a genetic component, about 30%, and environment 70%. And although we've been trying to breed hip dysplasia out of our dogs, we haven't been extremely successful because of the large percentage of the environmental causes. And the one good thing is that the environmental causes we can, to a slight degree, control. So we're going to chat a little bit more of some of these causes today and things that we can do to try and minimize the environmental impact on the incidence of hip dysplasia in dogs. We chatted about joint laxity and stability, and that joint laxity is the major problem that we have in these dogs with hip dysplasia. So that's actually the cause, the reason that the head of the femur doesn't sit well in the socket is because the tissues that are supposed to be protecting and helping to provide support for that hip joint are unable to perform their function, and the head of the femur starts to actually pop out of the socket or the acetabulum. I showed you a video on the weight distribution test to show how a dog alters its weight if it's got a minor lameness, so for a very subtle lameness, and just showing how they distribute their weight to different areas, and a little test that you could do if you didn't really know whether your dog was struggling with its hip dysplasia. You could see whether it was altering its weight, so if there was one leg maybe that it was favoring. We also did an indirect way of measuring muscle strength, which was the muscle mass measurements. And thanks to all of you that posted your measurements. We had a few that had really big differences between the left and the right. So say, for example, someone had 30 centimeters on the left and then 34 on the right, showing that they really the one that is 30 centimeters not using this leg as well as they should be. Some other people had equal measurements, which is good. That means that there's not one leg that is particularly bad, and usually those ones respond even better to the strengthening because they're not favoring one side. So if you didn't get to watch any of this, please scroll down and you can check this video later. Also make sure that you subscribe to the Follow Sunshine newsletter, because every time I'm going to go live, I will also send you an email reminder, and you also get access to the recordings via email. I'll send you a link to the recording so that you won't miss anything. Great. So let's talk about other possible causes that could result in an increased incidence of hip dysplasia. So one of the studies that was done actually at UC Davis, they had 759 golden retrievers, and they looked at those that were spayed and neutered before a year of age and those that were spayed and neutered after 1 year of age. And those that were neutered early, so before the 1 year of age, had an increased incidence of hip dysplasia and cranial cruciate ligament rupture, and also of some cancers, but I'm not going to go into that because it's not really applicable to the tutorial now, but there were some cancers that were also mentioned in the study. And one thing that I found quite interesting also is that they found that there was double risk of hip dysplasia amongst males that were neutered before 12 months of age. And the reason for this is that the testosterone is so important for muscle development. And if you have a look at two dogs, so one that was castrated at 6 months and one that was castrated at 2 years, if you look at their physique, there is such a big difference between these two dogs. The one that was castrated at 6 months will be, so if we're looking at them, say for example, they're now 3 years of age. The one that was castrated so early will have poor muscle development, wouldn't be as muscled, and look a little bit weeny. The one that was castrated at 2 years of age will be a lot stronger, and you'll notice a lot more muscle development and definition to the muscles. And the reason is because of the testosterone influence. So by removing the testosterone, we are not enabling these dogs to actually build their muscle mass. So now, for what I'm saying now, I'm not saying now don't spay your dogs. So nobody must spay or castrate because population control is important. But if you are able to keep your pets away from other dogs, so if your dog is on heat, for example, or if you've got a male dog that you know that will not find an intact female and will copulate and reproduce, so if you know that you're able to control this, it may be better for you to hold off a little bit and maybe wait until your pet is over 12 months of age for a female. And my recommendation always for my clients is at least 2 years for a male. Now, if your dog, especially male dog, has a problem with aggression or you're having some issues with marking, then you may need to do this earlier. But then you need to be aware if you do castrate your male dog early, or even your female dog early for that matter, you need to start right away doing strengthening exercises and make sure that the exercises that you are doing will help to support the hip as well as the knee to decrease the incidence of these conditions. So another interesting fact from that study was out of the 759 golden retrievers, not one of the cases that had a cruciate ligament rupture was an intact female or male. So the only cases that had cruciate ruptures had all been spayed and castrated. So that's quite an interesting statistic that they found. So just talking about the involvement of hormones, the reproductive system, all the systems in the body and all the organs in the body have a function. And our reproductive hormones and our pets' reproductive hormones are involved in key body processes. And one of the things they're involved in is closure of the growth plates in the bones. And so basically, by spaying these pets and castrating them early, what we do is we delay the growth plate closure. And this has effects on the joints. And one of the ladies that actually the vets that lecture for my rehab specialists, her name is Chris Zink. Some of you might be aware of her. She's very, very well known in the agility circles. She was involved in some studies and she looked at pets that were castrated early in comparison to ones within specific breeds that were castrated and spayed later. And she found that there was an increase in certain of the bones, and these dogs had a lot longer legs. And these longer legs obviously impact on the joints, especially the hip joints, having to take a lot of the weight of the pet. And so by spaying and castrating early, we are impacting the length of the bones, the growth plates, and ultimately how the joints develop and form. So another study that was done was looking at puppies that were allowed to exercise off lead, and the muscle development in puppies is really important. You know, when we chatted in tutorial 1, we spoke about how important the muscle is, and we're going to speak about it again today because that's really what we really focus on in our conservative management of hip dysplasia. We need to focus on the muscle because it's the only thing that is going to offer stability to an unstable hip that has hip dysplasia. And so these puppies that were allowed to exercise off lead on soft and uneven surface. I'm not talking about climbing over rocks and things, but just walking over bark, walking over small little logs. They had a lower risk of an incidence of hip dysplasia. And the reason being is because these different surfaces and walking over things, it was challenging their muscles, and their muscles were developing a lot quicker, so that the muscles were able to actually help stabilize the hips a lot earlier than puppies that are maybe kept in a confined area, not able to exercise. And one of the big problems is a lot of puppies are kept in these whelping boxes. They've got slippery floors, so they're not able to actually walk properly, get enough traction. They're not activating all those extensor muscles, which are the muscles that we're really looking at focusing to help with stability in the hip. So another study that was looking at the access to stairs, and especially in our young puppies, so 0 to 3 months of age, we found that these puppies that had access to stairs, and I'm sure you've seen all the YouTube videos of these puppies falling down the stairs, and you can just imagine the damage that they're doing. And we chatted about that little teres ligament, the ligament that holds the head of the femur into the sockets. Every time a puppy falls down the stairs and its leg goes out to the side, that little ligament will get damaged. And that is going to decrease our stability, and as the bones form, then the puppy may end up getting hip dysplasia. So we really, really want to minimize this. And I say to my clients that you need to block off the stairs. Puppies should not have access to stairs, especially in the first 3 months. And even in smaller breeds, I'd be careful even up to 6 months of age. A small breed, for example, like a pug, they have a very high incidence of hip dysplasia, and they're so small that they're not able to actually jump up. It's a big jump for them to get up the stairs. So in large breed dogs, first 3 months, it's out. Smaller breed dogs, even the first sort of 5 to 6 months, please carry them up and down the stairs. The last thing I wanted to chat about is weight. So lots and lots of studies have been done on weight and looking at hip dysplasia, looking at arthritis, and it's a very important factor for the development of hip dysplasia. And there was a study that was done, and it was actually a lifelong study, and they looked at 2 lots of dogs, ones that were fed a restricted diet and others that were fed an unrestricted diet. So the ones that were fed the restricted diet had a lower incidence of hip dysplasia, and if they were diagnosed with hip dysplasia, they were only diagnosed later on in life. So it's very important that we keep our puppies and pets lean. The heavier the dog, the greater the forces on the hip joint will be, and that will obviously increase in the hip dysplasia and osteoarthritis. And from the studies that they've done, that the first actually 8 weeks are very, very critical in these puppies. So, you know, we might start seeing signs at 4 to 6 months of age, but from the studies that they've done, from 2 weeks of age, there are certain things that start to happen in the hip joint if a puppy is going to develop hip dysplasia. And this is why I wanted to give you that weight distribution test, is that in your puppy that's maybe 2 or 3 months of age, try and do that test. It's not so easy because you can't get them still, but do that test and try and see if you can start picking up signs before you see the sort of classic signs that we're used to. And this is one thing as vets that we need to try and find a way to diagnose these puppies from a very early age. And we have a few different techniques which we're working on, but nothing that is really clear that we can say if we do this, because once we see radiographics, that's normally how we diagnose it, by radiographs. And once we see radiographic evidence, there's a whole lot that's happened before then, and then the dog already has hip dysplasia. So if we want to try and prevent hip dysplasia, we need to start trying to pick it up a little bit earlier. So the signs that you might see is difficulty in rising, a dog that might be unwilling to jump, run, or play. So as they get up, you see that they're a little bit lazy with their hind legs. You often see that they overuse their front legs to get up. They might be a little bit more stiff, or you might see a lameness that worsens after exercise. Just general poor muscle development in the hind legs. And you can often see this in some puppies when they're about 6 months of age, and this may be due to them not using their bodies correctly. The bunny hopping gait. Sunshine, my dog, does this all the time. So if she goes up the stairs, and I'll try and get a video for you guys and post it in the next tutorial, but she uses basically both her back legs at the same time, especially when she goes fast. So when she's running and she's running about, then I see when she starts to compensate, she'll start using both back legs. And it's just easier for them to propel their body using both back legs like that, because then they don't need to have that extension, or their leg doesn't have to go so far back. They often shift their weight to the front leg. So even if they're just standing, you might find that their weight is in the front leg. And I'd be interested for you guys to give me feedback. So let me know after the first tutorial, when you did that weight distribution test, did you find, especially I think it was Denise, I think your dog's back legs were equal. It'd be great to find out whether both of those hind legs, maybe your dog's shifting all the weight onto the front leg, and maybe that they're not putting that much weight on the hind legs and most of the weight onto those two front legs. The hip dysplasia waddle, I'm going to show you a video about of that, a dog in the underwater treadmill. And this is a classic type of movement. And people often think, oh, well, it's just a puppy. They're just sort of growing into their body, and they sort of either go skew. Sometimes they run actually with their bottom sort of one side, and that's often when we have one side that's worse than the other. If we have hip dysplasia in both hips and it's equally as bad, then they tend to waddle, so they just go from side to side, and I'll show you a video of that now. And then depending on the dog, most of the time I must say that I find that they stand with their feet wide apart, and Sunshine definitely does that, and that's because they want to make it a broader based, so they're a lot more stable because their hind legs are weak. But I have seen some hip dysplasia cases that keep their legs together. It's actually just painful for them to have their legs further apart. But you can have a look at your dog. Let me know. Put it in the comments. Does your dog stand with its back legs wide apart or close together? So this is a video of a doggy, and you can see here that that dog definitely has something wrong with its left hip. Don't worry, the video is going to loop. And what I wanted to chat to you about was secondary compensation. So it sounds like a big word, but it basically means that if a dog has pain in a hip, for example, or a joint, what they do is they alter the way that they walk because of this pain. So they overuse other areas of the body so that they don't have to use that area. An example, for example, would be a left hip. What they tend to do is they'll shift their weight onto the right fore and then overuse their back. And you can see this dog, you can see how its tail goes more to the left because the dog's actually trying to use its back to advance its hip. But I'll show you another video of that hip dysplasia waddle, and we can explain a little bit more about that. So here's the doggy in the underwater treadmill. And you can see how it waddles from side to side. It'll get going now, and you can really see that waddle. There we go, waddling from side to side. So what happens is when they extend their legs, the leg actually comes back, but that's usually where the pain is. So when you pull a dog's leg backwards like that, that's uncomfortable for them. And that's one of the tests that we'll do to see if a dog possibly needs x-rays. Maybe there's signs that it has hip dysplasia. So instead of extending their leg, what they do is they actually use their backs. So the dog will contract its back to advance the hip, and they underuse all the leg muscles and they overuse the back and shift their weight onto the front legs. And the problem with this is that we get muscle imbalances. So what ends up happening is we get tight spasming muscles, and these are usually the ones that are being overworked. So like, for example, in that dog, its back, especially the left side, will be very tight, but it'd probably be overusing both sides of its paralumbar muscles. And then we get muscles that are being underused, and these would be the hind legs. Because it's not using the hind legs properly and it's overusing its back, these muscles start to waste away. And the problem is as we've discussed, that the muscle is a very important part of joint stability. And so without muscle, with this loose, flabby, weak muscle, they end up getting more unstable hips. And the more unstable the hips, the more painful they are. And the more painful they are, the more they compensate. And we just get this complete negative cycle that forms with this dog just wasting away more and more and more. And the more it doesn't use its body correctly, the more unstable the hip and the more pain. So we really need to break the cycle, and we need to concentrate on developing these muscles, so strengthening these muscles to help offer some support for that hip. Because if we can strengthen these muscles, then we can create some stability for the hip, and the more stable the hip, the more pain, and the more pain, the less likely they're going to compensate. So what are our goals in these cases? So these are the things that we're going to focus over the next few weeks. We know these pets have pain, and we want to decrease it. So pain in the hip itself, and secondary pain from all those tight spasming muscles. So over the next few weeks, we're going to chat about natural ways to manage pain. I'm going to give you show you how to do acupressure. I'm going to show you how to massage the back, especially the back, because that's usually where they're very tight. So because of this instability in the hip, what often happens is that the cartilage that covers those bones, because it's so unstable, it wears away, and that becomes small areas of bone become exposed, called subchondral bone. And what we want to try and do is try and maintain this cartilage as possible until we can improve the joint stability. Because eventually what will happen is all the cartilage will be worn away, and then there's nothing that we can do. So we want to try and maintain whatever cartilage is still there, try and keep it as healthy as possible. And because the cartilage is important for the joint to be able to move and to be able to move smoothly. So we need to keep that joint as healthy as possible, even though we know there is this laxity and already some potential damage there. And our last major thing is to improve the stability of the hip. And we want to concentrate on muscle, building muscle, because that's what it's there for. That's why the muscle is there. It's there to actually support the hip. So let's concentrate on exercises that are specifically targeted to those muscles. And the problem is that when we walk our dogs, so often I'll have owners say, but I exercise my dog. I take my dog for a walk twice a day. When you're walking your dog is compensating. And what happens is that those compensatory patterns, or the way that they walk, you must remember that this has started happening from 2 weeks of age. And so these motor patterns, or the way that they walk, become so ingrained in their motor cortex to become their normal way of walking, that even when you take your dog for a walk, they are walking in this way. And so we need, and those muscles that we're trying to build are so lazy and so deactivated because they're never being used. So together with the exercises that we're doing, and today I'm going to show you an exercise called weight shifting, and we're going to try and help to activate those muscles. And the more we can activate them, get them to fire, when we start doing exercises, we're going to hope, and walking, we're going to hope that those muscles start contracting, and we need to try and break those compensatory patterns. And that's the reason why most cases or patients that have hip dysplasia, by just controlling the pain, by just managing one thing, and that's often what happens with these hip dysplasia dogs, is that you'll go to the vet and you'll prescribe anti-inflammatories and painkillers, but we will not be looking at the stability of the hip. And the problem with that is that because of these compensatory patterns, they're still walking in this way. So it doesn't matter if you minimize the pain. So we think that by minimizing the pain, we're going to break that cycle of them walking in that altered and compensatory way, but we don't, because it's ingrained in their motor cortex. And so these exercises are so important to try and break the compensatory patterns and activate the correct muscles. Stability is as important as managing pain and giving joint supplements to maintain the joint integrity. So here's the first exercise that I'm going to give you. It's called the weight shift exercise. So you're going to get your dog to stand with its feet hip width apart, and you're going to put your hands, there's a little sushi coming, you're going to put your hands on either side of the hips, and you actually want to put it over the hip joint, so over the glutes, and that's going to help with activating those glutes. So actually the pressure of your hands over those muscles helps to activate. And when I'm pointing over there, I'm actually pointing at the muscle contractions all down the leg. It's not so easy to see if you actually have your dog there. You'll be able to see those contractions. You might be able to just pick that contraction up there. So all those muscles in those hind legs are contracting. And what you're going to do, you're going to shift the weight. So to the left and the right is 1. So you're going to do that 20 times. And for the next week, I want you to do that 3 times a week, twice a day. So choose 3 days, do it twice a day. It sounds like it's not a lot at all, but it is a challenging exercise, but in a very protected environment. If your dog sits down after 10 and needs a rest, please let it rest and then get them to stand up. You can even decrease the number. Most pets should be able to handle 20 though, but you will see that your dog will get tired because they're using muscles that they're not using on every single day walking around. So the next thing I'm going to get you to do is to walk your dog very slowly on the leash. Usually when we take our pets for the dog, our dogs for a walk, we want to get them off the lead because it's fun for them. They get to smell and they run around, chase squirrels or do whatever they do. And so it's important that we try and get them to, just try and see if we can loop that again for you, sorry. It's important that we try and get them to walk on lead and slow, because when they do this, they actually are using their bodies a bit better. And a bit like that bunny hopping, where the faster they go, the more they compensate. We want to try and minimize that. So I want you to do at least half of the walk should be on lead. And if you could just walk them very, very slowly, the slower the walk, the better they're going to be using their bodies. And it's really a great idea to do this exercise after you've done the weight shifting. So do the weight shifting and go for your walk, because those glute muscles and all those extensor muscles of the hind leg will be like contracting, and hopefully we'll get some contraction during the walk too. So just very, very quick, because we're talking about walks, terrain. If your dog has hip dysplasia, I'm sorry to say the beach is out. You should not be walking your dog on the beach until they are strong enough. And the reason is because it overuses their hip flexors. When they're running on this hard sand, like in this picture, it's not so bad. But generally they have to walk through soft sand. And if any of you have tried to run in soft sand, you know how hard it is. It's very, very difficult. And if you do a beach run, for example, I've been running and doing 10Ks easily on the road, and then I've decided, oh, today I'm going to go for a beach run. The next day, my hip flexors, which are the muscles just in front of your hip, were so tight and so sore, and that's exactly like the dogs. And we don't want these muscles to be sore, because if they are, and they're tight and in spasm, they will decrease your dog's ability to be able to use its legs properly and extend their hip. And without extension, we don't get the contraction of the right muscles to help support the hip. So until your dog is strong, no beach. I want you to avoid rocks, boulders, thick sand, long grass until your pet is stronger. And I'm not talking about, you can still walk off-road and go into parks and things. I just don't want your dog jumping onto boulders, running through thick sand and long grass. It's just also a place where they're able to slip and fall. And once we get injuries, then we just take a few steps back in our strengthening program. So that was the end of the tutorial. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Please push like, put some comments, let me know how you're finding it. If I'm explaining in too much detail, if you want, anything you want, just let me know. I need to know from you guys. So next week, whatever I prepare for you, it'll be from what you've said, what you don't understand. If you need me to explain something again, just post it in the comment section below, and I'll be answering all your questions next week, anything that you need to know from this week's tutorial. So just a recap of what we're going to do next week, just so that you know. We're going to talk about pain and natural ways to manage pain. We're going to talk about how to recognize pain. And we're also going to talk about secondary compensatory muscle pain. And we're going to talk about how to manage that. So basic massage. and we're going to talk about the next week's exercises that we're going to do. So we're going to have some new, and every single week I'm going to have exercises for you to do. So please click the link to the AWeber link, sign up so that you can get access to the videos, because otherwise you'll have to keep going onto Facebook to have a look at the video if you can't remember how to do the exercise. Otherwise you can get it, I'll send you the recording from the people that have signed up. So thank you so much for taking the time to listen to me for my second tutorial, and I'm looking forward to next week, and I'm looking forward to reading all your comments, and I will do my best to answer all of you. Some of you I can answer some of the questions now, otherwise I'll choose some questions to answer next week. So thanks so much, and have a lovely day further.